Being able to make a live trap for a bird or small mammal is a key survival skill to know. It can be applied to almost anywhere in the world, and all you need is a few sticks and some cordage. I start off by tying 2 sticks together at equal lengths from both the top and the bottom. If your cordage is slightly lower than the lengths of stick you have cut, then this should make a rectangle shape. Once the rectangle is made, twist the sticks and it makes an X shape. Lay this down on the ground. Next, cut or snap a load of sticks of roughly equal length and diameter. Put the first stick underneath the X and roll it to the end of the cord until it can go no further. Then do the same at the opposite end. With the next stick, place it underneath the X, but this time facing vertical, and roll it to the end of the cord as far as it will go. Then alternate again and roll the next 2 sticks horizontally across the X. Keep alternating between horizontal and vertical sticks. Each time that you place a stick in, it pulls the cord even tighter. As you work your way up to the top of the cage trap, start to use smaller length sticks. Essentially, you are creating a pyramid shape. The cord will start to get really tight once you get towards the top of the trap. I should mention that I prefer to use tarred bankline for the cordage on this trap. It has a coating on it which makes it slightly sticky and holds everything in place much better than paracord, which can often slip under tension. When you have done the final 2 sticks at the top, place a short stopper stick to wedge these top sticks in place and keep everything rigid. Now you have yourself a cage trap. Next up is to make the trigger. Cut a stick around 6 inches in length and roughly the diameter of your thumb. For this particular trigger stick, I am using an oversized stick just so it's clearer for the camera to see. Make a saw cut in one end of the stick, only cutting to half the depth of it. Then rotate it and make another saw cut on the opposite side, again only to half the depth of the stick. Now break the stick in half and you should have 2 equal pieces that fit perfectly together like a puzzle. Here is another stick which is going to be the one I will use for the trigger. Use your knife to slice away some of the material on the inside of the stick. I thin out the material at the top of the stick to increase the sensitivity of the trigger, essentially making it a hair trigger. Thinning out the material also creates a gap for the bait stick to sit in. Lift up the trap, place the 2 sticks back together, and place the trap back down on the trigger stick, which should be placed at an angle. Insert the bait stick, and then spread some nuts or berries on the inside of the trap, ready to attract birds or mammals inside. Once the bird or mammal moves around, it knocks the trigger stick and the trap falls down like a deadfall trap. And there's how you make a live trap. Be sure to check your local laws and bylaws in the areas that you are doing this, as in many countries across the world, this is illegal. If you find yourself lost in the woods or you need to call for help, just a 6-inch piece of hazel might just save your life. Bend over a small sapling and make an angled cut with your knife at the bend. The pressure of the sapling bending should make the cut much easier. Then cut the sapling clear near the base of the stump so that it can regenerate. Choose a straight section of wood that is relatively free of knots. Use your knife to make a number of angled cuts around the diameter of the sapling, and then flip it round and make a more angled cut towards the one you just made. Now you can easily split the sapling clean in half. Now make some slice cuts on one end of the stick. Eventually you should have an angled point. Then make a very small V-notch just a few centimeters back from the slice cut. It only needs to be a shallow notch, but make sure the cut is clean and not messy. Then come back about 6 to 8 centimeters and make a shallow slice around the whole diameter of the stick. Sometimes it's easier to rotate the stick as you do this. Now use the handle of your knife or another stick to lightly tap all over the outer bark. This is going to help break up the fibres between the inner bark and the cambium layer. Then hold the top end of the stick in one hand and the bottom end in the other hand and twist and pull the bark free. You might hear or feel a small pop as it breaks free from the inner layers below the bark. This works best in springtime when the sap is running. On dry and warm days, it's much more difficult. Gently slide off the outer bark, being careful not to split or rip it. Place this to one side. Next, make a slice cut about 3 centimeters back from the V-notch and cut towards the notch. You will need to make the V-notch slightly deeper at this point. Keep making thin slice cuts towards the V, but be careful not to put too much pressure so that you don't slip through the V-notch and split the end of the stick. Finesse is pretty key here. You can stop making the cuts when you've got down to the pith of the stick, so about half the depth of the wood. Next, gently slide the bark sleeve back onto the stick, making sure the hole in the bark lines up with the V-notch that you cut. And now you've made a whistle, which can make a really high-pitched sound and can be used to attract the attention of search and rescue or anyone nearby. You can even use this to make an SOS signal, which is 3 short blasts, followed by 3 long blasts, and finished with 3 short blasts of the whistle again. This can be recognised internationally. The great thing about this is that you can keep it as part of your kit and even tie a lanyard around it with some cordage and keep it on you as you go on trips. Another simple trap that you can make is a spring pole snare. All you need for this is 1 sapling, a knife and a bit of cordage. Find a small sapling that has plenty of spring in it. If you want, you can cut the sapling so that your trap is more portable and you can take it with you. Clear off all the side branches and leaves, and from the same sapling, cut off a section roughly 50 cm in length. Make some points on either end of this stick. Next, go to the very tips of the branches and cut off a short thin twig which can be used as a bait stick. Finally, cut another piece off around 10 cm. This will be the trigger. Now you have all of your components of the trap: a spring pole, a trigger stick, a holding loop, a bait stick and some cordage. Push the spring pole into the ground and tie some cordage to the tip of it. Next, pull the spring pole down to a point where it is under high tension. Then mark an area where the cordage meets the ground and push both ends of your hooped stick into the ground at this point. Next, tie your trigger stick to the cord, making sure that it's at the correct height, that when it's pulled down to the ground, the pole is bent over with it. Then tie a snare loop at the end of the cord. You can use a sliding knot for this, providing your cordage is smooth. However, it would be best to tie a small loop and feed the cord through this. That way, the cord runs freely through the loop and reduces the friction when the snare closes tight. In this example, I'm just tying a simple slip knot. Now, put the trigger stick underneath the loop and place your bait stick underneath to stop the trigger from flipping back under the loop. It's going to always want to do that as it's under tension. If you put a piece of bark or a stone underneath the bait stick, it helps to stop it digging into the ground and reduces friction. Lastly, place your snare loop over the trigger, making sure that the knot is right over the trigger stick. Now you can place some bait on the stick or around the bait stick, and once the mammal gets inquisitive enough, it bumps into the bait stick, which sets off the trigger and then sets the trap off. The snare snaps tight and traps the animal. To make your trap more efficient and increase your chance of catching game, build up some debris around the edges of the trap to guide the mammal into it. Something like a U-shape or a horseshoe, to make sure that the animal has only one direction to go, and that's towards your trap. Again, be sure to check all of your laws and bylaws for where you live, as this type of trap can be illegal or you need a license for it. I'm just using this video as a demonstration. Bankline is a useful piece of kit. I use tarred bankline for a lot of bushcraft projects, as it's rot resistant and the coating on it helps to prevent knots from slipping. It's also much thinner than paracord, and so when you store it in your kit, it takes up much less space. But an added bonus is that due to the tarred coating, it burns really well when you put a lighter to it. Admittedly, I wouldn't do this all the time, as it gives off a pretty pungent, unfriendly smoke. It also burns well in wet conditions, so it can be ideal for getting a fire going. In addition to that, it often drops little melted balls of tar, which you could use as a makeshift glue if you are securing arrowheads to a shaft, or to patch up a hole in a tarp or tent. Just light the cordage, hold it horizontally for a few seconds, and then a globule of melted twine will drop off. Be wary of getting any of this on your skin though. Hedge woundwort, Stachys sylvatica. It's a relatively tall perennial plant that grows in hedgerows, woodlands and on wasteland. You'll often find it growing near nettles, and it looks very similar to the stinging nettle, and that's because it's of the same family, the Lamiaceae. Common features include a square stem, with the simple leaves arranged in opposite pairs and with slight serrations along the leaf margins. The difference between this and the stinging nettle is that this plant is soft and velvety to the touch. In summer, it produces a haul of purple hooded flowers. The plant can be crushed up and added to melted beeswax and oils to create a medicinal balm which can be used to treat wounds. It's a powerful remedy with healing properties. It arrests bleeding and is antiseptic in nature. It also has sedative properties when taken internally. The only downside is that it has a very unpleasant smell. Nevertheless, a good plant to know from a bushcraft and survival perspective. Leather is a craft item that is readily available nowadays. You can go online and order a piece of veg tan leather and have it arrive on your doorstep the next day. For centuries, our ancestors have been tanning leather and using it for clothing as well as armour. Leather can be made from a number of animals, but you can also make leather from fish skin. First, you need to skin your fish and descale it using a knife. You can still make leather with the scales on, but you can create a much more supple leather with the scales off. Now you can brain tan the fish skin, but the solution you get from it is so small and minimal that it takes a lot of effort. Instead, I make an oil-based tan solution using 2 egg yolks, a teaspoon of vegetable oil and a tablespoon of water. I soak the skin in the solution for about 30 minutes, working the oils into the fibres of the skin with my hands. Then I make a small jig from a small round stick and 2 support posts. I then soak the skins in water for 5 to 10 minutes before working them over the jig back and forth to help break up the fibres and make them more supple again. Then I make an oak bark tan solution. To make it, I just chip off the outer bark of an oak log and then put this into a Dutch oven or metal container. Place this on a fire and let it boil away for an hour, after which the tannins from the bark will have been released into the water. Sieve out the bark solution into a container. Once it's cooled, put the skins into the solution and leave it for a week. Stir the solution each day to prevent build-up of mould on the surface. After a week, the bark tan solution will have penetrated the skins. I then put the skin back into the oil tan solution, but add a small amount of natural soap just to clean off any mould build-up. I also add half a litre of water. Then I work this over the jig back and forth until it dries. I add some leather balm and work this again through my fingers. After a few hours, the oils will have penetrated the fish skin to make it supple enough to craft into a usable item. Gorilla Tape is a must-have for your survival kit. You can either store it rolled up, or you can wrap it around something like your knife sheath. That way, it's easily deployable. You can use it to repair holes in a tent or tarp, or use it as an alternative cordage if you run out. You can also use it to light a fire. If you hold a lighter to it, it will ignite easily and burn for a long time. Great for when trying to get fire going in wet or windy conditions. 2 years ago, I featured it in a video showing how to light it with a fire still. Simply cut or peel it into thin strips and then shower some sparks onto it. The edges of the tape has very thin, almost hair-like pieces of material. This is what takes the spark and turns it into flame. A great way to extend a piece of cordage is to tie 2 pieces together. One simple knot you can tie is a fisherman's knot. Place the 2 ends of cordage alongside each other, then tie a simple overhand knot but tie it over the other piece of cordage. Pull it tight, and then go and do the same to the other side. Tie a simple overhand knot over the other piece of cord that you are looking to join together. Now, with both knots tied, just pull on each end of the cord and the knots will slide together and jam up against each other. The great thing about this knot is that it's simple to tie and it holds fairly well. If you are looking for the cordage to hold a lot of weight, it's probably worth tying a double uni knot instead as it's stronger. There's a video on my channel called 10 knots for bushcraft and camping. The double uni knot is featured in that. I'll link it in the description below. This knot can also be used to make an adjustable survival necklace. If you want to carry a small flint and fire steel around your neck, you can simply slide the knots apart to make the cord much shorter, or pull them tight together to make the cord even longer. Great for an adjustable necklace which you can fit around your head. If you are looking to tie 2 different diameter pieces of fishing line together, or perhaps tie some fishing line to a braided line or leader, then you can use what is known as the Albright knot. I'll demonstrate the Albright knot using this same piece of paracord. Make a loop with one side of the cord. Make sure it's a fairly big loop. Then place the working end of the other piece of cord through this loop. Pinch the loop and working end together and then wrap the working end of the second cord around the loop. Ideally, you want to do this for 8 or 9 wraps, but as I'm using paracord, I'm just going to do it 5 times. Finally, put the working end through the end of the loop and begin to pull tight. Keep hold of all ends of cordage as you do this. Once the knot has been cinched down as far as it can go, let go of the tag ends and holding the main pieces of cord, pull apart. The knot will cinch tight and you'll have a secure knot that is great for tying 2 pieces of fishing line together. Cut off any tag ends so that the knot can run freely through the rod rings. Most survival and bushcraft knives these days have a sharp 90-degree spine, which can be used to strike sparks from a ferro rod. This particular knife that I use has some hand forging along the top of the blade. This is rough and textured and won't strike a spark from a ferro rod. However, I asked the maker to make the final third of the spine of the knife at a clean 90-degree angle. This means that I can still use that piece to strike sparks from a ferro rod. I'll leave a link to the knife maker in the description below. If, however, you don't have a 90-degree spine on your knife, you can either file one on there, or if you have a folding saw, such as a Silky or a Barco, these have very fine, thin spines, which can be really effective at getting sparks from a ferro rod. And the great thing is that you barely have to put pressure on them compared to using your knife. It also means that your knife will need less maintenance in the long run. I hope you found some of these tips useful. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to drop a like, comment and subscribe. And you can watch more videos like this in my Bushcraft and Survival Skills playlist in the video description below. Cheers for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.